Good evening, it's Natalie Zangon, and I wanted to do a video for you tonight regarding this important topic and understanding of the power and the importance of self worth. Where does it come from? What does it do for us? And what does the lack of it do for us? So, self worth is something that people sometimes, some people are genetically, biologically, are just more confident, but the other factor that's even more important is our early years of life and our upbringing and interaction with our caregiver. So, if you had a caregiver that was very encouraging and positive and kind of like the type that encouraged the child and mirrored and showed reaction and kind of was present with the child, it really affects the value and the self worth of the child. If the baby and the child was more ignored, whereas their physical needs were met, they were fed, they were dressed, they were in a loving home. However, the emotional availability was not there as much. This can have an impact on that child's self worth. The way a baby understands its self worth and value, it's how it is recognized in the eyes of the caregiver. Does the caregiver pay attention to them? Does the caregiver look at them? Does the caregiver mirror back what they're seeing? Does the caregiver make eye contact, the gaga goo goo mimicking of the voice, reacting the way the baby reacts, looking at the baby, especially in infancy, like birth to 3 months, birth to 6 months. These are the critical years of emotional development for the child, and especially with attachment, birth to 2 years. So the self worth of the baby is developed by, do you notice me? Let's take a moment and think of that. Notice me. Do you notice who I am? Do you notice my self worth? Do you notice me as an individual? Not only when I'm crying and you feed me, and I'm crying and you change me, and I'm crying and you put clothes on me and try to see if I'm hot and cold. Do you notice me as me? When I'm crying and I'm fussy and I'm uncomfortable, do you hold me and caress me? Do you represent and reflect my needs, my emotional needs? Now imagine you have an extremely caring, loving mother, but someone that has their own level of anxiousness, nervousness, someone that might have gone through immigration, someone that might have gone through war, someone that might have gone through poverty, stress, tension, frustration. So that mother, as much as they're trying to be loving and supportive, they still within them have a high level of anxiety and stress. So when they're holding that baby in their hand, as much as they're trying to do the gaga goo goo, their energy and the brainwave and the emotional presentness that they're offering, it's more limited than someone who's emotionally and mentally in a better place. And the baby, like a sponge, is taking all of that in. And the baby doesn't know that it has nothing to do with them. They relate it to themselves. Anytime the parents have a disagreement, anytime parents fight, little kids always relate that to themselves. They believe it has to do with me. I'm the problem. I'm the one that's causing it, but they don't know how to put words to it. So this all gets recorded in their implicit memory and in their body. Even though they might not have a cognitive expression of sharing, but their body holds on to it. And some researchers can even tell you that during pregnancy, when the mother is under higher level of stress, her body produces more cortisol and the stress chemicals, which affects the embryo and the type of frequency it creates in the brain, versus a child who had a calmer, more peaceful pregnancy when the mother was pregnant on them. So, what does that tell us? So, what is that telling us? That my self worth and my concept of self love is a reflection of my early years of my life and how I was taken care of. But everyone at any stage can create higher level of secure attachment and self love by working on themselves and developing and creating awareness and education for themselves and going back and to seeing where does it come from? There's this amazing book. It's called The Body Keeps Score, something like that. I think it is. It's called The Body Keeps Score. I blinked out of the author's name. And it teaches a lot about how our bodies hold on to these experiential situation in our life when we're growing up as a child, and how we felt about ourselves, how we related to ourselves. Birth to 3 months, highly critical. Many people call it the fourth trimester. And how the baby gets nurtured, held, cared for, attached, and loved really, really makes an imprint on the child's brain and the frontal cortex of developing. Do they go into survival mode because there isn't enough caretaking for them, or thriving mode, which they have enough love and affection and attention, so they go into thriving mode. So there's also some research recently that has shown us that there is some similarity towards infants that were raised in more of a traumatic experiences, but that are more trauma based, that their brain looks more neurodiverse than neurotypical children. And the only thing was a traumatic experience, but it interferes with the growth of the brain, causing the cerebellum to become bigger and the child going more into a survival mode instead of being in a peaceful, loving environment where it has to do with joy, happiness, contentment, and thriving. Also, another factor we need to have in mind, the mother that just gave birth to that baby, it's not so black and white that every mother loves their child. As hard as it is to hear this, not every mother that gives birth necessarily goes into loving the child. And you might ask, how can that be? Where there's a few factors into it. It could be unplanned pregnancy, an uncomfortable relationship that they're in, and also, it could be that they go into postpartum depression. What is postpartum depression? When the brain does not release enough of the hormones and the chemicals that the mother needs to bond with this infant. So they don't produce enough oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, which are all the bonding chemicals, especially oxytocin. So the mother not only can go into not loving the child, can even go to the point of hurting and wanting to kill the baby because she has no tolerance for it. So, the reason a mother loves that child is because of the chemical oxytocin that's produced in her brain through her pituitary gland and her hypothalamus, which is right behind the eyes, which is what usually takes place in a healthy pregnancy and delivery. But if the mother is depressed and anxious and has gone through some traumatic experiences, she can end up not producing that hormones and not go in the state of being able to express love, attention, and affection to her child. And this can also impair the emotionally development of a healthy format of the baby. Then you also get women who can be hired to become a surrogate. They know from the beginning they are in a status of pregnancy as a job. They don't necessarily grow to love that embryo that they're carrying because they're telling themselves, I am doing this as a job and I am a carrier. I'm the oven. I am the holding space for this embryo to develop. There are people who babysit after the child is born, and I'm babysitting, kind of like helping to develop this baby in my uterus. I'm not the mother, I'm the carrier of the pregnancy, which is just a whole other world of where we're living in the time zone that we're living now. So, what is love? What is affection? Love has to do with time, and self worth has to do with that time and affection that we receive. When growing up, especially in your early years of your life, if due to whatever factor you did not get that loving affection way to feel whole, to feel complete, to feel competent, to feel at peace within yourself, then you spend your lifetime trying to seek and prove that to yourself. You try to find a way to feel that sense of completeness thinking as if you're broken or detached and you need other people to make you feel complete about yourself. And sometimes individuals can get into very unhealthy relationship and become enmeshed with people that they're dating because they want to feel that sensation of completeness. Where does that void come from? Where does that shattering experience come from? Where does that lack of completeness and lack of self worth come from? If you go back, and again, this is not about blaming, this is not about pointing fingers, it's just about realizing the collectiveness of everything coming together. The type of pregnancy your mother had while they were pregnant, the kind of relationship your mom and dad had, the kind of interaction that this all impacts and makes an impression on who you are today in your life. Your attachment style has a lot to do with your relating to yourself and your self worth. Your triggers, things that set you off and frustrate you, has a lot to do with it. Your challenges, academically, emotionally, socially. We all have challenges and talents. So, having awareness of that makes a big difference of relating and understanding that. How conflict and connection was dealt with in your life makes a big impact on your self worth today. So, in order to have a good sense of self worth, is getting to a place to know that I have to come to realize that I have value, that I'm lovable, I'm valuable, that I'm important, and I'm significant for being me, not being for anything else, not because of what I do, not because of who I am, like who I'm, like being a wife or a mother or a sister, having value within ourselves for the entity of ourself, our goodness, our character, our attributes. And the more we work on developing that self worth and not relating it to anyone else, the further we're going to get in life. Thank you so much. More to follow.